Hi guys, Mr. P here. Now with all the love that the video I made about this book got online, I couldn't help myself. I had to grab another book featuring the woman, the myth, the legend that is Mrs. May, hashtag be like Mrs. May, and just share how she handles a very stressful task as a teacher, the school trip. So let's have a look. Now, as I got this wrong in the first video, this book was made in 1987, making these fantastic books over 30 years old. Now, my first observation, couldn't help myself but notice the difference between Mrs. May in the book, the play, and Mrs. May here. There is a striking difference, which leads me to believe that this school trip is happening on a Friday, and Mrs. May has got a big night on the town planned, which also makes me think it's payday. So on the Thursday night, she's gone and got her hair done, she's had a fake tan, she's just getting through the day ready for a big night out on the town. But when the realisation hits her that she's got to do this school trip, she starts to panic.
Hello darkness, my old friend, I've come to talk with you.
So we're ready to set off on our school trip. Straight away, massive error from Mrs. May there. If you've got a child who's car sick, you get them straight at the front. And efficient as always, she's got those risk assessments filled in, ready for the trip. And the one adult helper that she has, clearly the ratios of 1 to 5 or 1 to 6, hasn't been adhered to. He's causing all sorts of problems here. Who's going to want to eat that sandwich? And this lad doesn't know what sort of trouble he's going to be getting in. You know you can't be eating on the bus. So the bus stopped on the way and all the children got out for a toilet stop. Already Mrs. May looking at the watch. Is it 1 o'clock? Is it time to get back to school? Oh, and look, the caretaker doubles up as a coach driver. There's the government cuts coming through again. Oh dear, what has Rolf done here? Trying to be a lad here, showing off to everyone else, and his shoe's gone in the river there. He's having a mare, and Mrs. May is not happy at all. Why? Well, Mrs. May knows no matter how she explains it, she's going to be held accountable. And so yeah, what a silly thing to do, she's saying there. But really she's thinking, how am I going to explain myself out of this one? So they arrive at the zoo. Mrs. May went to get the tickets. Schoolboy error there, Mrs. May. Could have got them online, got a bit of a discount as well. And as it starts to rain, Mrs. May is hoping the rain stops. Why? Well, when she's had her new hair done, she don't want that being messed up. Priorities. Oh, you're joking me. It rained and the trip was just a washout. Don't get wet, said Mrs. May. Gonna be hard there. Caretaker's not bothered though, is he? He's just interested in his foot-long hot dog. So the rain didn't stop, the children get back on the bus, but Nadeem gives a suggestion. Can we go to the museum? What a good idea, said Mrs. May. Mrs. May knows the score here. She's got a choice between going back to school, probably having to do some sort of work in books and then having to take those books home and mark them, doing triple marking, 3 stars and a wish and the rest of the highlighting stuff. So she's thinking, no thanks, let's get off to the museum. Absolute renegade. So they get to the museum, kids are really excited. Mrs. May, don't run, call Mrs. May, the dinosaurs won't go away. Classic Mrs. May. Top teacher joke there. So they're now investigating the dinosaurs in the museum. Biff had a camera. Wonder whether Mrs. May knew about that. Unless it's a disposable camera, otherwise you're not allowed anything else on the trip. And this is where Mrs. May has hit the jackpot. She can just sit down and let the museum guide do all the talking. And when they're asking questions, Nadeem gets it right. Good Nadeem, says Mrs. May. Who do you think's going to be this week's star of the week? And of course they get the visit to the gift shop. But let's be honest, there's no way you'd be getting a book like that or a model to build with the £1.50 you're allowed to bring. But it's payday for Mrs. May, so she can get the visa out if needs be. And Mrs. May is now relieved we're back to school. Job done, get the Prosecco ready. The museum turned out to be a success, and guess what, she's going home without a book to mark. Nadeem, the absolute legend, can we draw dinosaurs tomorrow? What a good idea, said Mrs. May. Why? Because it won't need triple marking. And then this storybook finishes with them talking about this magic key, where the children are sort of using their imagination and stuff, but no point in talking about that when you've got to learn how to use the past progressive tense in a sentence. So there you go, I hope you've enjoyed that video. If you know another book featuring our hero Mrs. May that you'd like me to have a look at, drop us a message. Please feel free to share and like the video. Follow on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube. And remember, if you're struggling when you're teaching, always think, what would Mrs. May do?